My moment of impact is when I was nearing that 40 milestone, when you stop feeling quite so bulletproof and looking forward to what I wanted my golden years to look like.
Today's impactful guest is Kim Lecuyer. Coming to us from Quebec in Canada, Kim is a holistic nutrition consultant, and she owns her own firm, Nutrition Lecuyer. Kim is passionate about food and preventive health, and so she loves her current career where she combines both. I am so thrilled to talk with you today, Kim. Thank you so much for joining us on the pod.
Yay! Thank you, Katy. I'm so happy to be here. This is fun.
Excellent. All right. So we have a little challenge for you listeners and viewers. In this episode, we are going to give you lots of juicy tidbits about how to get your health to the next level through improved nutrition. And we will be talking about lots of things, including how the food you eat affects your overall health, why diets and willpower, not the solution, what health can feel like at any age, how important your mindset is to your health and well-being, and we know you love stories. We all love stories. So Kim will be sharing some powerful stories of health transformation, demonstrating why she is such an impactful holistic nutrition consultant, generating a ripple effects of impact. This is not a podcast about weight loss. It's a podcast about health. And sometimes when you take steps with your medical team and your nutritionist to improve your health, you end up losing weight as a consequence. And if you are curious to learn more about the power of holistic nutrition, you will find this conversation useful. Kim is a certified holistic nutrition consultant, but neither of us are doctors. So always consult with your doctor before you begin any new health regimens. Now, people, let's flip the script and let's ask you to think about what part of Kim's story resonates with you. What's one simple action you could take tomorrow that could improve your health and well-being? What's one meal you could try next week to experiment with a new healthy ingredient or a recipe? Kim and I want to know. So be sure to email us at katy@katyhansell.com. Without further ado, Kim, what is your moment of impact?
So my moment of impact is really a combination of a few things, but I would say specifically when I was nearing that 40 milestone, when you stop feeling quite so bulletproof and really looking forward to what I wanted my golden years to look like. And that is my moment of impact.
Awesome. So take us into that scene. There you are, a lovely 39-year-old. And how did you really experience the approach of becoming 40? What you talked about, you no longer felt bulletproof, right? But what was sort of the mental and emotional cocktail that you were experiencing?
So my background is in animal nutrition. So I was an agronomist, and I'm saying this because in that sphere, basically all of the focus, all of the energy, all of the money, all of the time is put towards prevention, and that mainly through nutrition. Okay, so that's where I'm coming from. Animal nutrition didn't really light me up. So fast forward, I co-owned a retirement home. So we bought a retirement home. I ran it with my mom and my sister. And what I saw during that period was just so the reality of seeing our seniors every day, getting that refrain almost on a daily basis, the golden years, not so golden. That combined with seeing my dad going through all kinds of health issues and nearing that 40 milestone was really kind of what set me up for my aha moment.
Kim, that's a lot. So you're talking about this this collision of events under the backdrop of your training as an agronomist. So as an agronomist trained in animal nutrition, you had direct experience in the field advising farmers on how variations in feed can create protective effects,
Exactly.
health prevention for their livestock, their animals, right?
Yes.
So that's sort of the backdrop. And then you have this, what you call this perfect storm, where you've just started to have a lot of contact with seniors because you have, with some family members, purchased a retirement home. Your father, your beloved Pops, is starting to experience failing health. And then you're looking ahead to which is a big milestone for anyone turning 40. So, my gosh, that's a lot, Kim.
It was a lot. And it was really, those were really all of the things that kind of gelled together, right? So working with the seniors, what we were seeing was that it was the focus was always on just suppressing symptoms, right? So for example, someone would complain of constipation, they would get a pill. Someone would complain of heartburn, they would get a pill. Can't sleep, get a pill. So this isn't about being anti-medication, but these are things that are easily preventable. And all of these medications do come with a price tag. There are side effects, right? So I think our average senior was taking something like 11 pills a day. That was like the average amount of medication. Some were taking up to 20 or 30 different pills a day, right?
Mm-hmm.
That watching what my dad's illness was doing to the family, like the impact of that on the family. So how incredibly stressful it is to have, a father or a husband that's no longer able to work, that needs 24-hour care. We were starting to worry about mom because she was burning out. She was the main breadwinner. She was keeping it all together. We were running a business. It was just a lot. So yeah, so the seniors, golden years, not so golden, seeing what my dad's health, health issues, kind of the impact that had on the family. And then, just nearing that 40 milestone, that was when I really realized there is so much room for prevention in our human healthcare compared, as you said, that backdrop of prevention in the animal system, right? Prevention is cost effective. So in the animal system, it pays to keep animals healthy because calling the vet is very expensive, right? So that's the backdrop. That's where I'm coming from. And then the human system, it's a completely different scenario. So that was really what prompted pursuing my studies and looking into holistic nutrition.
Yeah, and I want to go to holistic nutrition consulting in a minute, but I just want to share. Yeah, so we lost my mom a couple of years ago, and she had dementia, and my father became the primary caregiver with a massive assist from my sister, who lives relatively nearby, but also had a very demanding full-time job, and we, the toll on both of them, I mean, they did it lovingly, willingly, but it really, caregiving is really a massive investment of time, of energy. And when you live with the person, also it's kind of unrelenting, right? Like, because you're always like, what if they fall?
Yeah.
What if did they take the little pill? And are they hydrated? And so shout out to all you caregivers out there. It's, it's beautiful work. And we really need to recognize the investment that people are making in their families. And that must have been so hard for you to watch your father have his health fail, your beloved Pops. Tell us a little bit about your father.
Yeah, Pops was always strong. He was handy. He no one would ever have described him as frail. So he spent the last 5 or 6 years in a long-term care facility, which means that he had 24-hour supervision. He was wheelchair bound. He was taking so many medications they had to grind them up and put them into some kind of pudding or something because it was just too much to swallow. So just all that to say, the quality of life, his end years, were not great. So, and this isn't about trying to outrun death. What I'm talking about, it's really about the quality. It's just about aiming to be productive, pain-free, vital for as long as possible. So, yeah.
Yeah. What's one fun story about Pops when he was in his prime? What was something he loved to do?
Well, he was definitely, he was more than a jack of all trades, but he was just such a handy guy. So he could fix anything. He built his own house. Him and my mom
Wow.
built their own house with their own, I'm talking, made the windows. They collected rocks, and it was a beautiful stone house with dormer windows. And so that's just to give you an idea of how handy this guy was, right? So he, took the logs from the bush to the sawmill, had some boards made. So this was a gorgeous, beautiful, this was our home. So yeah. So, but this kind of paints a little bit of a picture. So super handy guy, super active, incredibly hardworking. He deserved a nice, long, happy retirement. And that kind of, didn't get that. And neither did Mom. She lost her BFF. Sure. They were such a pair. Yeah.
Such a pair. Thank you for sharing about your beautiful house. I really appreciate that. So I got to ask, what prompted you to buy a retirement home? It's not a usual career move.
No, it isn't. It isn't. So I don't know exactly what prompted the move, except that. So I was a food gal. I've always worked in food in some way or other. So, animal nutrition, people nutrition, cooking. I also love just actual cooking. So I was the food gal. My sister's a registered nurse. So that's an important role in a retirement home. And my mom is the administrative gal. So she was great with all of the admin stuff. So it was such a nice experience. It was a very steep learning curve because, as you mentioned, caregiving is a lot. It's 24/7. This isn't produce on a shelf. These are living people that come with a big circle of their own people that need to be reassured and dealt with. So
Right.
it's quite, like I said, it was quite a learning curve. It's quite a business. But it was really lovely. It was a nice learning experience. Yeah.
All right. So a lot of listeners out there, your 40s are a time where so many people pivot careers. You've got some great foundational skills. You've got some wonderful experiences. You've started to build a professional network. and you look ahead with this big milestone birthday and think, what's next for me? So you had this perfect storm, you had this insight that prevention works. And what did you decide to do for your next career chapter?
Yeah, so we kind of knew that we weren't that, we sold the retirement home when we were at the top of our game. We knew that we didn't want to pursue. We were doing really well. So that perfect storm, as I mentioned, kind of prompted or is where I saw the gap in, where there's so much room for prevention. So I looked at different avenues, and I was just starting to kind of get acquainted with alternative care. Yes. And it's too bad that nutrition is still considered alternative care, but yeah, so it didn't happen overnight. It took probably a couple of years of researching, but holistic nutrition really felt aligned. And it's funny, I remember going, so as during my studies, I went to spend the day with a mentor. So she's a holistic nutrition. She had been working in the field for 20 years. She was a rock star. And so I went to spend the day with her, and she says, well, so what's your niche? What are you gonna specialize in? Well, I really like prevention. Prevention's kind of my thing. She shut me down. She said, prevention doesn't sell. Prevention is a hard sell, right?
Okay, so you go back and you pursue additional education as a holistic nutrition consultant. You become certified and you decide to set up your own practice. And in the back of your mind, you have this whisper from your mentor saying, prevention doesn't sell. And so you open up Nutrition Le Crier, and the phone calls start coming in. But what are the phone calls about? What are people calling you about? Are they calling you for prevention, or what are they calling you for?
No, they weren't. They were not calling me for prevention. Um, they weren't. It was, I'm exhausted, or I'm gaining weight despite doing all the things, or I have aches and pains and my inflammation is all over the map, or not all over the map, but my inflammation is out of control. My hormones are all over the map. Uh, those were cravings. Yeah, and all digestive things, right? Everything digestion, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, like all of that stuff definitely is where holistic nutritionists shine. But yeah, so absolutely no one called me saying, hey, I want to rock my golden years. Nope. Nope.
Okay. So I've heard you talk about how lifespan and healthspan are not the same thing. Can we go there for a second? How do you think about lifespan and healthspan?
It's really the quality, I think. Yeah, it's really about quality, and I'm gonna say living on purpose to a certain extent. And I think that is my vision of prevention. I'm kind of making this up as I go along, but it really is. So at that 40 milestone, I was looking down the road and I was going, I don't want this. I don't want what I'm seeing right here. Right. So, yeah, so it's really being deliberate about your future you. And I was just talking about this recently, so it's front and center, but we invest for our retirement. We put money away for our future selves in that way. We change the oil in our car. We're taking care of our future car. Same car, but we're taking care. So we do practice prevention, but so often, I mean, people are just so overwhelmed and there's so much, right? So it's not always easy to do for ourselves. But so I don't know if that answers the question, but that's really what it is. It's just kind of being on purpose. And because I really see at this point of the game how, yes, genetics have an impact, but there's more and more research now that shows that genetics accounts for maybe 10 or 15% of your health outcomes. Diet, lifestyle, environment is really the massive player, right? So the
Yeah.
analogy I like to use is you have this loaded gun that can be called genetics, and you can leave it in your underwear drawer and just leave it there, and it can never, you decide whether or not you pull the trigger on that genetic potential to a certain extent. This isn't to say that to a certain extent, right? But we have way more control over our health outcomes, I think, than is put out in mainstream stuff. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. So people were calling you and they were saying, I'm exhausted, I'm fatigued, I have digestive issues, I really need some help. A lot of them reported they were struggling with their weight, right? And I've heard you say that there's something which is, to quote you, the biggest ROI, return on investment, move you can make to promote both weight loss and overall prevention. What is it?
So it's really addressing those insulin levels. So without getting all technical and doing like a physiology class here, I didn't realize how much impact that has on overall health. So I refer to insulin as the master commander in the body. So that blood sugar picture, right?
Right.
That's what came to mind when you said the ROI, because I know I wrote something on that and I couldn't remember what I'd written. But yeah, it's really that element that is a big player.
Yeah. So talk to us about the dance between insulin and metabolic syndrome. What is metabolic syndrome?
So metabolic syndrome is that cluster of symptoms that is high blood pressure, usually blood sugar dysregulation, high cholesterol, and it's usually all wrapped up in belly fat. So there's also that's kind of one of the symptoms. And that's it. All of these things are connected. So so metabolic syndrome is that cluster of symptoms that even, inflammation, cravings, the ability to lose weight, how easily you gain weight is all connected to this insulin picture. It's really, really, really big, right? Yeah.
Okay. So please correct me if I get this wrong, but just to kind of play the role of the non-nutritionist trying to follow the information. So you're saying that like the early warning signs of a problem with our health show up as metabolic syndrome, right? We've got high blood pressure, we've got high cholesterol, we have high blood sugar, and maybe we have belly fat and these other things that you describe, right? And then you say the super commander that can help with this is insulin. And insulin is our blood sugar regulator. Or come in here and help me out. Let's talk about insulin and insulin resistance. What is the role of insulin, and then what is insulin resistance? If you care to.
Yeah, so insulin is really is a hormone that we all have, right? And insulin's job. So we know that we don't, people that are diabetic, like diabetes would be the end of the spectrum of insulin resistance. Type 2 diabetes is kind of end of the spectrum, right? So and we're all on this spectrum. That's the thing. Okay, we're all, and I would say that metabolic syndrome is even not an early warning sign. I would say there are other signs that come up way before that.
Okay.
So insulin is in charge of basically taking that sugar out of the blood and putting it into the cells, right? But what happens is our cells the cell is full of sugar already. So insulin comes knocking. Insulin is the hormone that tells the cell to open up to put the sugar in there. So
Okay.
insulin comes knocking and the cell says, I'm already full. Thank you very much. I'm good. That's the insulin resistance. So it requires more and more and more insulin to open up that cell to let the sugar in. Does that make sense?
That's such a great explanation. I've never heard it described so clearly. That makes perfect sense. So I've heard you say insulin is a stockpiling hormone, and I think that's the cycle you're describing. So the cells say, "No way, we're full," and then what happens? We just keep craving more sugar, or like what's the cycle?
Well, let me explain it this way. This is what made it all click for me. You've
Okay.
heard of animals that hibernate in the winter, right? Bears.
Right.
Bears hibernate. Let's go with bears because I'm not sure about other hibernating animals. I think raccoons do.
I
but anyways.
also hibernate in the winter.
You did
I'm
you a little
gone
bit,
from
but yeah.
December to March.
Exactly. Yes. So what triggers these animals to start stockpiling reserves in order for them to be able to survive all winter long on their fat reserves? Okay.
Mhm.
Think about the foods that are available in the fall. So we've got berries. I don't know if bears
Yeah.
are eating squash, but think about the squash. Think about the combines in the field harvesting those grains. Think about what else have we got? Ripe fruit, the apples, all of
Nuts.
it. Yeah, all of those kind of higher, starchier, sweeter foods that are ripening in the fall. Animals are eating these things. And what does that do? It spikes blood sugar and it makes insulin rise because we need insulin to get that sugar into the cell. So that high insulin creates an eating frenzy and they're putting on their reserves. So we are designed the same way. It's not a bad thing the way this is all set up. It's just that with modern foods and normalizing whatever's happened, our plate is always set up as if it was fall time. Right?
Okay.
Right? So this is why we
Right.
hear so much about, and I really don't like going down that path, like carbs are bad or absolutely not that. These are beautiful foods. It's just about
Right.
getting the right proportions.
That is a great metaphor, and it's very instructive and elucidating. So you help people navigate what to eat to improve their health and well-being as a holistic nutrition consultant, and you advise them on natural whole foods and so on. So how can balancing your nutrition resolve insulin resistance, and what do you counsel people? What's the gateway through the foods that we put in our mouth?
So it's really there's no, unfortunately, there's no magic one thing, right? Because there's no one thing. So through a bunch of different diet and lifestyle changes, through balancing the plate, so getting the right proportions of those beautiful carbs to protein. Can I say a big one that's top of my list is just cleaning up the diet. And when I say that, is filling the plate with wholesome natural foods that don't necessarily have an ingredient list or have a very short ingredient list. These foods that have an ingredient list, as long as your arm that you can't pronounce half of the ingredients, they are messing with your health, with your insulin, with your gut, with everything.
We are hearing today about metabolic syndrome. We are hearing about how insulin resistance shows up and what to do about it. And I've heard you talk about, inflammation and other things, oxidation, right? So it'd be fun to kind of run through some of our favorite antioxidant foods, some of our favorite anti-inflammatory foods, so that people that are listening, they can go home and think about, I'll start us off because I maybe only have two. and then you can come in. So for a long time, I looked very askance at chia seeds. I was like, okay, what's going on here? And then I'm, have a fantastic doctor. I have a fantastic dietitian. And so I decided, I should start eating Greek yogurt with chia seeds in it. And it's actually the greatest thing. And then I was like, wait, I can start my day. I can hit it with a little tart cherry concentrate. I can hit it with some pomegranate seeds, a little bit of kiwi, a little bit of pineapple, and it's like the breakfast of champions. And then I was like, well, I'm kind of suspect of quinoa because I can't pronounce it. Did I get it right?
You did.
But then,
Perfect.
okay. And then I started working with grilled vegetables and quinoa, and it's been really transformational. So what are some anti-inflammatory, antioxidant foods, Kim, that people should think about inviting into their homes and giving a test drive?
That's juicy. I could go on and on here. So I'm a food first gal, meaning I always like to use food whenever that's available, right? So to get the omega-3s, we're going for to get the antioxidants, we're going for food. So short version of that, to answer that question, short version would be all fruits and vegetables are superheroes as far as antioxidants go. So and also variety. Sometimes people get caught in that rut, like, okay, this is healthy. I'm just going to do this over and over and over and over again, right? At my exercise class, one of the gals there this week was saying her son eats nothing but broccoli and chicken over and over and over again because he's trying to bulk up. Broccoli's great, chicken is great, but it's all of these beautiful. So if I had to pick my favorite, I would say leafy greens, and nobody gets enough of these into their diet. So but I have tips. Like these are the things. This is what I work with clients, right? So leafy greens, amazing, just nutrition powerhouses. Your chia seeds, beautiful. They've got fiber. They've got beautiful omegas. But there are other things. So again, it's yes, and right.
Yeah.
And let's build that rotation up and get some nuts and seeds in there, and then let's get some eggs in there once in a while if you do eggs, and let's try. So it's just really, really getting that beautiful variety. And so my approach is always moderate. I'm not about restricting any foods. It's really about selecting the absolute best version of that food. So
I love it. So it's about balance. It's about how you structure your plate, your mix of protein, carbs, and fats.
Yes.
And shout out to those dark leafy greens, y'all. Let's hear it.
Right.
Swiss chard, kale, spinach.
Yes.
Come on.
Yeah.
All right. So we love stories. And you have some wonderful people that you have counseled, consulted. Some of them have shared their stories on your fantastic website, nutritionlequier.ca for Canada if you're in the States. And so let's talk about the beautiful, inspiring story of Lorraine.
Yeah. Lorraine is amazing. When the things that we were just talking about right now, diet, the actual foods, I call that the nuts and bolts. Like the lifestyle changes, maybe cutting down on snacking, drinking more water, that kind of stuff, plus the food. I call this the nuts and bolts. What Lorraine really did really well with were I call them the soft skills. So she really dove deep into figuring out. So Lorraine was a serial dieter. She had lost and gained and lost hundreds of pounds over her life. So that yo-yo. And she really did a lot of work around her limiting beliefs. Basically, that story, those stories that play in our subconscious that sometimes we don't know are going on, that are not
Yeah.
necessarily the truth. I know you know what I'm talking
Yes,
about. Yeah.
I do. I have those stories, and I think yo-yo dieting is so relatable. So she had an awareness of the impact of these stories, and that was something that really helped her. Kim, is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what we spent most of our time on. So yes, we got a nutrition plan and we got the nuts and bolts part all settled. And that's fine. So those are the tools, right? But then diving into that whole mindset, looking at those limiting beliefs, I actually got her to I really wanted her to gain a few pounds. So she lost 120 pounds. She did amazing. Okay.
Amazing.
Part of my process involves, I don't want to say forcing because I never force clients to do anything, but really encouraging clients to push pause. So usually when I work with clients, it's over a long period of time because we want all of these skills and these habits and these new tools to be sustainable. Otherwise, it's just another diet. It's just another yo-yo ride, and we don't want that, right? So
Right.
again, what I spent a lot of time, or Lorraine and I spent a lot of time doing, was really diving into those stories. So she did one day, and there was so much resistance to, to kind of loosening things up a little bit and allowing herself to just gain, we're talking like 3 or 4 pounds. And the stories came back. That was really where she noticed and brought that to the front. Whereas those stories had always just been playing kind of in the background and without even noticing that was going on, right? So so that was really, really powerful. And once you know that, you can't unknow it. So it just helps to reframe and, moving forward so she can see, okay, oh, this is what's going on. Wait a second. This is not the truth. Like you say, we all have these limiting beliefs. We all have these stories going on in the background. Sometimes it's just bringing them to the front and realizing, okay, wait a second. Thank you. Thank you. Because somehow these stories get set up in our past to protect us somehow, but they may not. In her case, they were not serving her anymore, and were a big kind of underlying reason why there was that yo-yo pattern. So yeah, so that was Lorraine. Yeah, it's amazing gal.
Yeah, she's a very brave woman, and that's an amazing journey. And your partnership with her was so fruitful and beautiful. And I think it's so important that you share the importance of mindset and really just having that first step of awareness. Like, what are these stories that I'm telling about myself? Maybe they were told to me and I internalized them a long, long time ago. Maybe they're part of social media conditioning.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody just said something to me and they didn't even mean it, but I've held on to it and put it in bold font in my mental tape deck. So
Yep.
I think really awareness is so key because we can't really eliminate our stories, but we can learn to reframe them. We can learn to dance with them. We can say, this story, it served me at some point and now I'm ready to let go of it, or this was never my truth and I no longer need to try to entertain it. And really reclaiming that sense of agency, that sense of empowerment, that I am the master of the stories that I choose to believe in. And the other thing, Kim, right, we've both seen this, we both have coaching backgrounds, is you can choose new stories, people.
Yes.
You can choose new stories. And when you choose new stories, it tends to, take the microphone from your old stories. It sends your old stories off center stage, somewhere way down in the costume closet of the show, right? And so I think it's so important to think about your We know we have neuroplastic brains. We can tell ourselves new stories. We can have these narratives. And I know you work with clients on that and help them avoid the sabotaging. So you were able to work with Lorraine to avoid that by having her have this tiny little rise in weight and have the stories fed back. And then you guys could partner to get to the bottom of that. So let's talk about the importance of self-compassion.
Yeah. So, that was the example that you just used with Lorraine is something that plays out with, I would say, almost every single one of my clients, because so I'm not attracting, people come to coaching because they've already reached a certain level usually, and maybe they're hitting a wall, or maybe what they're doing isn't working anymore. But I'm not attracting the hot dog eating Pepsi drink, like, you know what I mean? Because that would be so easy, because those people would just get miraculous transformations. But what I see, especially with women, is this incredible ability to, what's the word? Like, just being so hard. There's just so hard on it. We're just so hard on ourselves, and it actually, I actually see a pattern that comes around so often, that women are afraid to let off on the self pounding, on the self recrimination, because they feel like if they do, they think that they're just going to go off the rails. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like the self-dampening, the self-judgment, the compromised self-belief, all of these things are ways of separating you from your true self. And your true self is bountiful, thrives, is authentic, is anchored in self-love and self-compassion. But what happens is we move through the world, and definitely in our current society, we can't help but internalize all these mixed messages. And a lot of them are very damaging. And like you said earlier in the podcast, they're not the truth. They're not the truth of who we are, right? And so I think, what's helped me a lot is journaling and writing. I originally decided to write a Substack because I was thinking it would get my voice out there. Maybe it would be good for branding. Then I discovered that's probably true, but that's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because it's so helpful. It's so cathartic. It's so reflective. My days usually fall, and then at night I'm usually tired. But then if I start writing, I all of a sudden, Kim, I have like this massive flood of energy. So you're someone that takes care of your health and your well-being and tries to coach yourself to have positive stories. What journaling works for me? What works for you?
So all of the above, right? Like, so the journaling, the solid morning routine, tuning into the stories, paying attention. And usually, our bodies will tell us when it feels heavy, when it starts to feel heavy and icky, there might be some kind of weird story going on that's not serving us, curiosity, just getting super curious to how, so these are things that all of my clients have to go through, that we start off the process with journaling and getting really clear. What is your food story? What is your food story? Let's start there, because sometimes our food story doesn't serve us. You would be, how many clients say that, my food is an inconvenience. I just wish it's just a wish I could just, take a pill. Like, I wish I could just not have to deal with that.
What? Who are those
I
people?
know, it makes me so sad, right? So you just said it so beautifully, but it's all of that together. And that's where the sustainability picture comes together, because it's not just the nuts and bolts. And this is where so many people feel a little bit betrayed by their bodies, or like they're maybe failing, or like they're not good enough, or they don't have enough willpower, they don't have enough. And that's never the case. I have never had a client that doesn't have enough willpower. They need a
Right.
strategy. They need to cut through all of the noise. Like I need to, eat some weird berry to be healthy.
Yeah.
Or, do this intense intermittent fasting and not eat for 24 hours. Like, no. So they need to cut through the noise. They need the strategy. They need the nuts and bolts. They need the actual tools. And then they need to dive into all of that stuff. And because if there isn't self-compassion, just what you said, our true selves, I can't even repeat what you just said, but you said it perfectly. Like, we just need to come back to our inner being with some of these things. And it applies with nutrition and diet as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful. And I think there, when you talk about willpower, what we learned earlier in this episode is people, you don't lack willpower. Your insulin's messing with you.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So get rid of the guilt, get rid of the shame.
Yeah. It's not serving anything.
Talk to your doctor.
You can be trusted. You will not eat until you explode. If you stop on the nasty self-talk and the self-pounding, you can be trusted. And this is something that a lot of women need to be reminded of. And it's just like a core belief, and it's a little sad. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, also, like women, and this is true for men too, but, a lot of women have internalized these messages that they need to look a certain way, and their value is very much their appearance. And God forbid they age, because that's going to be a massive negative. And thank goodness there's plastic surgery and all the things, because God forbid you actually look like your actual age. And I was a little flummoxed watching the Golden Globes, watching the Oscars this year, because I love fashion. I love the Met Gala. I love watching like amazing fashion. Like, I could sit and watch red carpets for a very long time. And a lot of very beautiful actresses looked completely different. And some of them looked way too thin.
Yeah.
And so I think like there's a lot of messages out there, and this current trend of, I don't know what to call it, ultra thinness. It's scary. So I guess, I don't know if that's just an American phenomenon, but we're seeing it here. And actually, I was really thrilled recently that there was a jury verdict against YouTube and Meta, which Meta is the owner of Facebook, that that those systems, those platforms, are designed to be addictive, and part of the flaw in the design that people need to be protected from is harmful content can be shown. And so I think I was quite excited to see these juries come up with these guilty verdicts in the States. And there's a whole movement here to get people off their phones, let young people be in school without having to be on their phone. Let them be able to go home and go for a walk outside and kick a soccer ball around with their sister or brother and not have to be on their phone, taking selfies to keep their feed active. So, Yeah, that's
Yeah.
quite a digression, but there's a lot of pressure on people about their appearance. So
Yeah.
let's get rid of that pressure and love our bodies and take care of our bodies. So I guess there's one other thing I wanted to ask you, which is, what gives you hope?
Mm. People. I think people are good, and I think that's it. That gives me hope. You know, I mentioned to you, like, I can't watch the news, and I can't watch, like, I really have to have very strong boundaries around social media, and even just the amount of information I consume, because it does affect me. It really does mess with my energy, and my energy is my job. I want to show up fully and in the best way possible. So I really have to have those solid boundaries. But whenever I talk with folks, and it's usually these one-on-one, like with my clients, with just people, I always come out hopeful. So yeah, people are good.
People are good, and people are always just doing the best they can
Right.
with what they have.
Yeah.
And you're sharing some really powerful tools today, Kim, some really powerful insights, and also just deconstructing that, it's not our fault if our health suffered, right? We're in this environment with this standard American diet, and a lot of us are struggling to buy groceries, trying to stretch the food dollar with inflation, and now what's happening with farmers and fertilizer and crops. And it's hard to put a meal on the table. And, people are doing multiple jobs, and they're just trying to hold it together.
Yep.
And what I love about your approach is you're not into restriction, you're into empowerment. You're into providing people with this nuts and bolts foundation, but then really helping support the lifestyle, support the mindset, help us let go of those stories that are no longer true for us and perhaps never were. That we all have. Everyone has these stories. And so that's why I think you've created such a massive impact, and the ripple effects of all the people that you've worked with, right? Then they can show up more in love with their bodies, more in love with their lives, and it ripples out to their families and friends, right? So I just want to commend you on the powerful work that you do. And this is a very inspiring story of coming full circle on the value of prevention and helping people thrive and access their well-being so that their lives can be fulfilling and their golden years can be golden.
Right.
Yeah. So here's a shout out to our listeners and viewers. What are your takeaways from today? Maybe jot a couple of them down, pen and paper if you're on the go with your phone. And maybe schedule some overdue health appointments, right? We're really busy, and maybe we haven't had all those check-ins that could help us. And then Kim shared a lot of tips today. Maybe think about one thing you could do this week that would benefit your health and well-being, and write it down. And then maybe think about, when are you going to do it by? Because sometimes I know with myself, if something seems hard to me, I avoid it. But if I visualize myself doing it, then I tend to be more likely to follow through. So if that can help anyone else, I'll just put it out there. And, what's one thing you can do to build your social connection, right? I think we, we're emotional beings and we're in some hard moments right now. And I think our friends and family want the best for us and can help pull us through. So, let's shout out to Hippocrates, who said, "Let food be thy medicine,
Yes.
and medicine be thy food."
Yes.
And thank you so much, Kim. It's been our honor and pleasure to talk with you today.
Thank you, Katy.